Open up
Maybe
for
it
it.
is. Woo! There it is. Oh man,
Yeah, we had to
beautiful
click off.
beacon.
We had to click off the overlay. The overlay was on. Let me do it again. Let me show it. And it was like, there we go. Like, where were we?
Look at that. Oh man, double overlay.
We meant to come on here at 4, but shouts out to everybody that's gonna checking in later, so on and so forth. Definitely appreciate you all for tuning into Community Beacon. It is Friday, 12 days before Christmas, actually. Is it? Yeah, 12
Is
days
it 12
before
days
Christmas.
before Christmas?
Yeah,
12 days before your birthday?
11.
Oh yeah,
11.
24.
Yeah,
That's
I
right.
looked at it yesterday. I was like 12, 12, 24. I was like, 12 days left until the
Oh, that's a
birthday. Let's
24, buddy.
shout out to young Duval. Young Duval wrote something this morning. I thought it was funny. Let me see if I can pull it up on his Instagram where he said, and I had to agree with him. If your birthday falls between today and January 3rd, don't be looking for a shout out because nobody cares besides your mother.
Gosh, man, he was wrong.
He's right.
He was
It's
wrong.
no,
I
he
care. I care about
he
your birthday.
I
I
appreciate
care. See that? He was wrong.
you are in the
He
minority.
had a
People
shot. He had a shout out. Now it just got with that shout out was bankrupt.
no,
Can't
no,
cash that one in.
I would give it to him. You are
No,
in the
because
far
this is one
minority.
brother that cares about a brother
I
that's got his birthday in between
I
that time.
listen, brother, I appreciate it. And once again, you are in the minority. We face the facts over here. I think at Community Beacon, we face the facts. And this is I've tried to make it something different. I've attempted. I started saying I'm not even going to tell people happy holidays or happy birth or or Merry Christmas until after my birthday, which is that means I'm only going to say it for one day. But that
Sure.
lasted all a good 2 to 3 years. I still might say it, not say it to
That,
anybody.
that's interesting. That's a long time. That is
Hmm.
a long time, sir. Lasted 2 to 3 years.
Yeah,
God,
yeah.
man.
2 to 3 years I
You,
played that
you are
game.
one consistent individual. I give
Well, we
that
know
to you.
we know that part. That's a
Yeah.
These are the facts. We're both consistent. Look at us. We're going on for 3, 4 years of Community Beacon. So we both got that going on. What else? What else? Oh yeah, let me give a shout out to Clint Seville, my cousin. He's over at the Boys and Girls Club. They had another community event yesterday for fathers. They're doing it throughout this month. That happened to be at Headlines Barbershop over there in Riviera Beach, right off of Blue Heron.
Hmm.
And so yesterday they did another part of their series. I want to say it's Project Path or Facts, Fathers and something about children. Don't quote me on it, and I know y'all are gonna hate me, but we had some technical difficulties early, so I didn't even get a chance to put it in there. I should have did this yesterday or something, or after I came back. And I thought it was awesome, man. He had some handouts that he gave in regards to fathers' rights. Essentially, that's you know we got to start from the foundational, just the beginning. Like we, there's no need even to go to the next step when we got to really establish a foundation. And so it was awesome for us to get around there. Elijah got a chance to. I took him with me as well to get a quick shape up at Headliners. I used to go to that barber shop years ago. So it was awesome being back there with Will, who's the owner of that shop right off of Blue Heron, and we used to call it the oh man, what is that plaza called? Imperial. It's the Imperial Plaza. So you have the Boulevard Subs is sitting there. There's a nutritional, look like a smoothie shop that's there, and Headliners has been there for a very, very long time. So it was an awesome event. If you all get a chance on Thursdays between 5 and 6, as a father, go check them out. Lots of information. I think that's what's missing in our community is just getting some of this information out. And we have the resources. They even have food. So if you like Popeyes, I told them I can't eat Popeyes, but bring in some fruit next time. I'll definitely continue going out there. But it was awesome. We talked about a lot of different things, even some geopolitical things that I thought was interesting to hear from the brothers. So shouts out to Will, shouts out to Clint. Appreciate you all for Thursdays. What's going on with you, brother?
Hey man, another day. I'm back here in Community Beacon with you, thinking about this holiday season, this time spending with the family, being around the family. Very grateful. I got one more day at the fire department for this year,
Oh
and
wow,
I'm closing that out. I won't be
well that's
headed
good.
back until the new year.
I love that.
So that's where it is, man. That's where it is. Getting that time. Shout out to Jasmine. Yeah, she got sick. And even when she's sick, I mean, y'all, deathly sick, she still shows up.
Shouts out to
She's something
Jasmine.
else. Yeah, I
Jasmine, an
definitely
integral
appreciate her.
part of the Tenacity Foundation. You and your team over there are always making things happen. So let's get into it. Let's get into it. We're finishing up this series on leadership. We're talking about leading with a purpose, and I think one of the you were saying, how do we continue this thing? How do we allow it to be relevant throughout? Lasting leadership. Am I correct on that, or did I butcher it? I'll tell you exactly what it was.
Talk
Uh,
to me. You got some quote from the last one?
well, what we spoke about this is the final episode, and so we're talking about creating lasting leadership, a legacy,
Mhm.
whether through impactful decisions, mentorship, or long-term societal contributions. I'm just reading what you all sent me. Leaders are defined by their ability to leave a positive, enduring mark. So we're going to talk about, I guess you said political and non-political. How do we have this leadership last and inspire future generations? Let's talk. Talk to me. You talk to me.
I like it, brother. I like it, man. Well, I guess we'll start off with um, how a great leader focuses on outcomes. Let's start there and not the credit. Let me add that piece. Being outcome focused and not credit purpose focus. You know, inspiring other people versus just showing up to get the accolades.
Hmm.
Focusing on achieving and doing their best to eliminate distractions. You know, keeping the process from derailing. Being pleased with team goals. Let's start off with that.
What I find interesting when you mentioned that, focused on the results, and you said not necessarily the what.
The
Like we're
credit.
focused on the credit. And so what's interesting to me is when you said that is that if we go back and we look at a lot of, we've named a lot of these names we've named before, we're going to continue naming a lot of the older leaders, just civil rights leaders. We talk about Martin Luther King, we talk about Malcolm X, and so on and so forth. And what we notice is that they weren't popular. Like how we look back at their legacy and the things that they spoke about and some of the information that they've given us and just their what we would call their legacy. I mean, we got people who wear shirts, we got tattoos, we got all kinds of things that represent these leaders. We go back and I mean, Martin Luther King is the only person who has his own day in American history. But if you go back and look at the approval of them amongst their own people, they weren't necessarily the most popular. They weren't the
Mm,
most. Everybody wasn't behind them. And not just everybody. The majority of people you'll see weren't necessarily behind them. So what we're looking at are people who are kind of trailblazers in a sense, but more so just going against popular opinion, right? And that's what made them so relevant. That's what made them so um prolific. Is that
Mm,
here I am, I'm standing here and I'm going against what's popular, what certain things that we may say maybe in our homes, you know what I mean, or maybe amongst people who kind of agree with us. The quote says speaking to the choir, but then they took that same message and they decided to speak it on a national level, speak or local level, then a national level, so on and so forth. So being able to do that in the face of it, like that's part of the lasting legacy. I'm not sure if you would agree.
yeah. Well, I like that. I think that that brings a little more light to part of what I was saying, and just a little clarification so that my quote isn't misconstrued. But we're talking about they're focusing on outcomes, just slightly different than results. Although the two words are interchanged frequently, I feel that results relates more to I do this, expecting that, and outcomes don't necessarily have to be promoted by what I do necessarily. Like we could have a great outcome because you showed up, and it may not have anything to deal with me pressing towards a mark. Now, it could be an indirect outcome. And that's what I mean by you started talking about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And as we talk about him frequently, Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali. I think we talked about him. Even Will Smith. When I think about the way he constructed his book, some of the outcome that those men or Denzel Washington, some of the outcomes that these men landed in aren't always directly associated with what they did. And when I think about Martin Luther King Jr., he started off very locally inside of a, group of other preachers, pastors, deacons that felt like there needed to be a change. And he was just a part of the gathering. He was just a part of it. And the outcome of him showing up and speaking once, twice, three times, whatever it was that they elected him to be a leader before others. Now, whether he was looking for that or not, it's what ended up happening. I think that is just in essence, I think that stands to be one of those things that are just a slight difference. What do you say?
The difference between results and outcomes, them
Yes,
being more focused and a leader being more focused on the outcome versus the result.
right.
So a leader is showing up that's saying, even if I don't necessarily um, do a thing, me being a part of this is showing that I'm a part. I'm more focused on the outcome. I don't necessarily have to be put in front, although this in this case he was.
So what I'm saying is this:
Yeah, please.
the leader, a leader should be focused on if I have a goal, if the leader has a goal, you're attempting to get to a specific location. A lot of times people will end up being so result focused that they believe if they don't do a thing and it doesn't show up as the thing that they desire, then it's a failure. But I believe that a leader is looking for the obtained outcome, the overall goal. So even if I'm just a part of the group of three or four or five or six, and you, Mike, are a part of that group, and I don't come up with the idea, but you go and do XYZ that produces the result, then the outcome is here. We still reach the outcome. So I'm going to get in there and I'm going to cheer and push everybody up.
Oh
I'm going to
yeah.
push you up because we got to our outcome. It didn't have to be uh, the self the selflessness of the leader is part of the driving force that makes everybody feel like they're a part of this thing, like they're moving in the right direction. And people will still turn around, and those good leaders have a way of shouting out everyone else. And when they're really a good leader, those individuals still look back and say, it's because of you. And it can be an argued thing, but you'll get into one of those little conversations with somebody in the hallway, and they'll say, yeah, but if you hadn't spoken with me that one night, because I went home and I thought about everything you said. And the next morning I woke up, I was motivated, and I made one phone call, and lo and behold, this is what happened. And it's like leaders, they tend to do those types of things where it's like, it doesn't have to be me who says the word. Now, there are many leaders where it has to be them that says the word, but we're talking about legacy builders, people who can inspire a nation to do something, and they don't have to have a direct connection with how it is done. That, I think, is a hallmark of a true leader.
I mean, I love it. And I think it does, that takes a special kind of person to not necessarily want the uh you know to be put in front of the of the thing all the time. Like it's almost like if it wasn't my idea, if it's not my ideal, then it's not a worthy ideal, and this is the only way that we're going to get to this goal, which I think is interesting. I think it's interesting. I've always um observed this specifically in our community, that if it wasn't our ideal, then or my ideal, then especially if they're in the position of leadership, maybe they are up in front of are the face of it, but then you come to them with a certain ideal, and if it's not there, then they don't want to really expound on it because it's not their ideal, even though it's a great ideal. And I've it's a part of just I would imagine mostly human nature. I noticed it really quickly as I matriculated through the city and watched and observed the people around us. 'Cause I happen to be around a lot of so-called local leaders, and what I found, because I'm this is my part of my ideology. I don't really want to be. I personally don't want to be in front of anything. Sometimes I am, sometimes I'm not. It really doesn't matter to me as long as we reach that certain goal. So what can we do is to kind of, what's the movie Leonardo DiCaprio was in? Um
Don't
uh,
Inception?
Inception.
Gosh, man, how did
I
I
de-
pick that up?
I developed an uncanny way of doing inception, to where it's like you kind of just plant that ideal in them, or plant the thought, right? You plant the thought or the seed, and then you allow it to grow. Now this takes patience. This takes, you know, because you never know when this person's going to come up with this ideal. And then when they do come up with it, you say, man, that was a great idea. Another person who spoke about something similar, and I'm just giving you all tangible ways of how you can do this for those of us that actually just want to see progress, was Chris Voss said, "Let them have your way." That's
Mm,
part of, in the book, in his book, what is it? Never Split the Difference.
never
He
split
says
the
never. He
difference.
says let them have their way. Well, what does he mean by that? He says what I do is I allow people to talk, and I just start to ask them certain questions, and I wait until they come up with the ideal or the thought that I had in mind, and I say, you know what? That's a great ideal. So this may take, this is once again patience. This is understanding. This is compassion. These are all of the things that we spoke about as being characters of a great, what I would call a great leader. And here's the thing as well, just on this same vein, is that we've named certain people, but some of the most probably prolific leaders will never really be known. They'll never gain notoriety, right? Because there's people in the background that are doing this, that are sparking these different ideals, and we'll never hear of them because they're not necessarily the face of the,
Mm,
possibly the movement. And as a person, you should be okay with that. To me, I'm like, just be okay with that, as long as we're moving this needle forward. you know why do I necessarily need to take the credit?
mm. I remember Daddy McCullough said that a great follower may someday make a great leader. I think that I feel like we kind of touched that just slightly. You know, there's a time and place for all things, and sometimes you can just have great ideas, and your ideas spark what is necessary, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have the capacity to lead. And so sometimes these people that are those prolific individuals, these bright stars of individuals, sometimes they fail underneath the pressure,
Hmm.
because in leadership there can be pressure. You have to be you have to be courageous. You have to be brave. You have to be willing to stand by yourself. You have to be willing to be, quote unquote, the only person with this idea, with this thought. Now, granted, if you are the only person with this thought or this idea, you're not leading anyone but yourself. However, if your thought and your idea can be articulated in such a way that other people can think within inside of themselves and say, you know what, this person is right. I'm willing to do something that I have never done before, which is one of the reasons why I tend to speak about MLK Jr. so often, because what is a nonviolent movement? Especially with people that have been oppressed for so long that they want to see violence. They're ready. They're ready. So I thought that that was inspirational, because in this message that he had, he was able to inspire others to be courageous like he was, and to do something that was deemed careless. So I love that. I think that courage is something, is a hallmark of a leader. They must be courageous.
I love it. So we're adding courageous to it. I think a leader also, just for lasting, just to stick to as we continue down this path of the topic, is the leader has to create community. A leader it has to have a lasting effect. You create this community. You create a place where people feel as if you're possibly speaking for them, or you're speaking for them. You're creating this thing where they're, and now through that being happening, um, they're taking that same message and giving it to the people around them. I th- I go back to the part of the leader, because I have no problem with a person who leads themselves. I think that's where it starts, and I've been saying that since the beginning of the series. The leadership starts within yourself. You got to lead yourself. You got to have, and it should, and hopefully it comes from a sound doctrine, ideology, so on and so forth. But now, as we start to get a little bit bigger, as we start to bring people into our circle, then it's like, how do you create community for this people? How do you create and a community where people can come in and ask some of these questions? Because you should be able to defend your points and your stands and your positions. It shouldn't just be based on, empty nothings, or just based on your minute experience. It has to be able to, uh,
Encompass.
yeah, and other people have to be able to, yeah, other people have to be able to use it if you want to bring people in. They can't attempt to do this by only being you, meaning they have everything that you do. It has to be the same thing, because some people may not necessarily be able to communicate. Some people may not necessarily be able to be charismatic. Some people aren't charismatic. Some people are introverts. Some people don't want to be out in the front, but they can still use some of the principles that you use, and it can also, you know, man, the word's not coming to me right now, but they should be able to use your principles. It should apply to them.
Mhm.
And I was just thinking, because I was reading, I read the Bible in the morning. That's part of my routine. And I was looking at First Peter, and it just popped out. First Peter 5, and this
Mm.
is 2 verses 2 to 3 and 5 to 6. And I believe he was talking about the elders. I just took a snippet of it. And it says, Shepherd the flock of God that is among you, exercising oversight, not under compulsion, but willingly, as God would have you, not for shameful gain, but eagerly, not domineering over those in your charge, but being examples to the flock. Likewise, you who are younger, be subject to the elders. That goes back to kind of when you spoke about following. Clothe yourselves, all of you, with humility towards one another. Humility. For God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Humble yourself, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so that at the proper time he may exalt you. So this is like this patience of being this leader, because it's like you start with yourself, right?
Hmm.
And then the flock. These are the people who are immediately around you, and you do it willingly. And then I love when he said that. So I had to add the humility part. So it's like, humility towards one another. For God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Humble yourself. Be able to take criticism. Be able to not be the, and I see this a lot. And some of these brothers are like super talented, very articulate in their speak. Within, now that we have the internet, people are able to, you know, speak these different things. They have some interesting ideologies, so on and so forth, but then they're not humble. It's like the moment someone questions them, or the moment, and we're all gonna make mistakes, but people are making mistakes and they feel as if they're always have to defend their position. They're not taking a place of, okay, just because this person isn't as articulate as I am, just because this person is not necessarily as charismatic or doesn't necessarily have the platform, the followers, or whatever vain metric a person decides to use, I need to defend myself, as opposed to saying, hold on, let me use some introspection. Maybe the way that I'm going about this is the wrong way. But if you're always just prideful because what I say is right, because I've been doing this, this is not a long lasting thing that you have going on. This is gonna it's gonna crumble pretty quickly. There's a guy right now who's going through all kinds of mess, because this is the internet and people will check you. So one of the things you don't need to do is present yourself as false, because I'm telling you, I've seen people go back and find they go back and find your great grandmother's picture to prove something. They're digging all. This is called doxing on the internet. They will dox you. They will give out all your information, and they will go back to find out, what's going, exactly what it is that you got going on. So when you present yourself as this false person, almost idolizing you as a false idol, essentially, you are you're setting yourself up for failure. This is not lasting, because what's going to happen is you present it and it sounds good, and maybe you put this on for 6 months. Heck, maybe it goes for a year, maybe it goes for 2 years, but then on that third or fourth year, it all crumbles. It's this is happening. So this is how you create um this lasting leadership, this lasting legacy of your leadership. If that, that's what you want to create for people, is to kind of be true to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. That's where you started too. Being a leader of oneself, being a leader of oneself without dissimulation, right? You have to be honest, true, verdant, um, integrity, dissimulation, without hiding or concealment of one's true self. And from that, I believe that that's when that leader starts to emerge. And I love the scripture you went to, because in that scripture, it gives room for growth, right? God will exalt in due season, in due time. When the time is right, you'll be exalted. Like Peter, when we talked about Peter on one occasion, Jesus comes back, Matthew 16:16, I believe it was. He comes back and speaks with the disciples and said, who do men say that I am? Some say Elias, some say John the Baptist, but who do you say I am? Peter says, thou art the Christ. And he's like, blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood have not shown you this, but my Father who's in heaven. And right then and there, he's lifted up. He is made the leader. Now, I believe it was the sons of Zebedee. On one occasion, there was a little argument among the disciples, and they came to Jesus and they said, they wanted to know, well, who's going to sit on your left hand, on your right hand when the kingdom of God comes in the fullness? And he says, it's not for me to give that, right? Jesus took a very humble point of view. He's like, that's not for me to give. My Father will choose that. That's not for me to give. But he that will be leader of all will be servant of all. And this is where the study of the servant leader really takes flight. This is one of the principles. You mentioned principles earlier. The philosophy of the principles of a leader, they should be something that people can follow, whether you're alive or whether you're dead. It should be like a testament. If you have good philosophy, good principles, if you have something that can last through generations, it doesn't even have to be something that you made up. It could be something that you found another leader was leading with, and you adopted that and made it your own in such a way that other people started to gravitate towards it. A leader should have gravity. Gravity. People should gravitate to you, not because you're calling them to come to you. Not that you can't call people to come to you, but because when people see you, when they recognize you, Jesus stated on one occasion, he said that you are the light. A city that is set on a hill shall not be hid. And that gives us great understanding that you shouldn't have to hide. Leaders don't need to hide. All they have to do is live. He said, let your light so shine that men may see your good works and glorify the Father in heaven. So it's like when we start talking about leadership, we're talking about allowing for our light to do what it does. So it's not really about putting our light out there. It's just about being true to ourselves. Dissimulation, walking without dissimulation. We need to be filled with integrity, filled with honesty. We should have morals and virtues. We should have principles, and these things should be principles that can last a lifetime. If your principle can only last through a conversation, it's not a principle. It's only a conversation. It's an opinion. But when things become something that has its own life, has its own right, it becomes something that you can stand on. So I believe in the principle aspect of it. There should be principles. Sound doctrine is something that you stated, and that I think that is consistent. I believe that another word to add to it, which we had on last week, was consistency. I believe that is a huge piece of it. We should not have to continuously change our philosophies as a leader. If I talk about something today with you, Mike, next year it should be the same thing, if not something that has grown out of it, right? If we're planting the seed of leadership in today's conversation, then a year, 5 years, or 10 years from now, someone should hear a conversation where they can look back and say, I know where he got that from. I know where Mike got that from. I know where Joel got that from. They were studying 10 years ago on leadership, and these concepts bubbled up inside them. So they had a conversation. And even if it's not the exact same words, it is growth out of those words. There isn't a huge variation. It should be something that has showed, okay, I can see the bark of the tree. Now here's the fruit of the tree. And that's the way leadership should be, because your words are so consistent that you've gone down to the root of the matter. And you didn't just come with the colorful flowers of something. I don't know if I took that the wrong way. I don't want to lose anybody on that analogy. What I mean is, you actually got what makes the tree of your philosophy grow, and that's what you're presenting, instead of going and borrowing somebody's the flower of somebody else's conversation without any depth.
That this is the brother speak to a point. What we're seeing now, and because people like to copy. People see someone doing something or saying something, they're like, okay, well, this person is gaining some kind of traction. I want to gain the same type of traction. So what we see now, definitely on social media, in media, is we see people taking other people's talking points. So let's break it down. People are using other people's talking points. Sometimes they give them credit for it, oftentimes they're not. So and this grinds my gears because they water it down. Grinds my gears. You want to know what really grinds my gears? Is that then they'll also take certain stats and they'll repeat these different stats. And it's at times it's almost like playing it's almost like playing telephone because they'll take the stats, they'll take another person's talking points, and they'll use them for situations that they don't necessarily either they use them for situations that they don't need to be used for, and or they'll butcher the stats. So now someone will come to they'll kill the argument that was made from the beginning because what people don't do is they don't actually get down to the root. They don't do their diligence. Well, where did this person get this information from before I repeat it? What philosophy is this person getting it from before I repeat it? And not only just that, but not using it to bastardize it, not using it to make it what it is that I want to make it do. This is how we start to manipulate the different stats. So it's better if you go and you figure out, okay, this is this person talking points. Let me see where they got it from, and do I even agree with it? Like, do I even agree with this person's talking points? And then when I start to look at this talking points, well, where did they get that from? And you'll start to find out that this person who actually started these different conversations, they had mentors before them, or they're still dealing with this. Here's another thing as far as being a leader. You should be able to go you should have someone that you respect enough, and we can call them mentors, you can call them coaches, you can call them whatever you want to call them, but you should be able to go back and have someone that you can start to bounce these things off of. Like we spoke last week, there's nothing new underneath the sun. So if there's nothing new underneath the sun, that means that this and oftentimes this is what happens. These this information, this ideal, these different philosophies, they've been researched all the way down the line. There's stuff that backs it up, that backs it up, that backs it up. When you go and you speak to and Joe starts talking about the scripture, it's not like he just woke up and said, "This is my interpretation of it." He may get his interpretation of it, but then he has mentors and people that he goes to, and they have discussions about it, and they're talking about it, and they're breaking it down. Like, how did we come up with this? Like, this is how did we form this? What's the context of it? And you'll listen to Joel, and Joel will, here's the scripture, and he'll go to that scripture, then he'll go to another scripture that also refers back to this scripture. This is how you go back and forth, and you start to really hammer out these ideals. This is why leaders most people aren't leaders at 20, 30 because they haven't experienced, they haven't done the research on it. And some of them aren't even, like, once again, they're not even using someone else's research on it. Not to say that this can't happen. We spoke about Martin Luther King. He was a very young pastor and came up at a very young age, but it didn't come out of nowhere. He had his father there. His father was there to talking to him about it. He came up in this kind of vein. He was very gifted individual, so on and so forth. But there were still people around him to say, okay, I'm sure this is what I'm thinking, and let's go back and forth on it. This is why, even as a leader, it behooves you to get around other people to have some of these higher level conversations, just to hash out some of these things in the philosophy and this doctrine. That way I'm not just a parakeet repeating what someone else says. It comes out sounding crazy, and sometimes you are like giving information to someone that it doesn't really apply to them. you're sending these people down a whole different rabbit hole, and they shouldn't even be the conversation shouldn't even be had. That's not where they're coming from, but you're just parakeeting these things. You're parakeeting these things because you heard someone else say it, and it made it made sense. One day we got to do like some of these sayings that are often used, and it makes sense. I say it sounds good or whatever. We don't really check Beethoven, like say we don't check the Carfax. You got to check the Carfax on a lot of these different things that we're talking about and we're expounding. So as a leader, it behooves you to do your due diligence to continue checking this information. And here's the point, and I'll go in a different way, Joe, that you went, is that yeah, 10 years from now, we'll see where we started. Okay, Mike and then we're talking about leadership, but then we're also throughout this time we're gathering new information. And at sometimes it's like, oh brother, I was, I had it wrong. Because his brother might come to me and give me some information. I'd be like, oh, okay. And be able to take that information and put it towards what I have and say, okay, I kind of was thinking in a different direction. Now the brother gave me some, because we have to be able to accept new information. This new information might change my perspective on it. Oh, okay. I will not be so attached to this way because now I have new information. I didn't know this was going on. So I think as a leader, so I would add that doing your due diligence as a leader. Just don't expound a lot of this stuff.
I love it, man. I'm glad you brought that up. Definitely had it on my mind because one of the next words that I wanted to offer us was vulnerability. I believe that a leader should be vulnerable. And I don't mean just like walking around with your emotions on your shoulder, and the slight of trouble, you're crying in somebody's, somebody got to hold you up because you just can't take it. No, I mean when you find that you have erred, you are the first one. When you figure it out, you are the
Hmm.
first one to bring it to the table. Nobody has to bring it to the table for you. Nobody has to come in opposition. Now, it's two different things when it comes down to that. When you believe that you are right, and you, like Mike said, you're doing your due diligence, then I believe you should stand your ground as long as your belief is true, right? As long as there's no hidden agenda behind it, as long as it's not, oh, well, if I admit that I'm wrong, I'm going to lose my 300, my 3,000, my 30,000 followers. So I'm not going to admit that I'm wrong. I'm just going to hold to it. Like they say one of these quotes, I want to stick to my guns, right? No, a leader would be vulnerable and would get up and say, listen, I was wrong about that. I had a conversation with Mike and he broke down information that I was not privy to, or that I even saw. I read it, but I didn't understand it the way he did. He took me down a pathway that really shed some light. We need to make an adjustment. Leaders lead. That's what they do. They lead. And even when a leader is put in a position where what they are leading people in can be uh, there's a pivotal point where they can move left or right because what
Hmm.
they see is not necessarily the thing that they saw down the road. See, it's just like when you're looking out from a pier over the horizon, I believe that you can see about 3 miles, maybe 3 to 5 miles. I think that's what it is. So if you're on a pier and it's a certain amount of feet up, maybe like 5 to 10 feet up, I think it was like 3 to 5 miles is what you can see over the ocean to the horizon. You could look way out there. Don't quote me on that, but you can look way out there and you can see something that looks like a ship. But when you get on a boat and go out there, you might find that it's not a ship. You might find that it was an oil rig. You might find that there was land on the other side and it's a house. You might find that it was a mirage and it was simply the way that the sun was shining on that day. And see, a leader, when they get there, they realize truth. And that's why vulnerability is so important. Because you have to be willing to say, all right, okay, that's on me, y'all.
Ain't that some? No one's infallible. Some 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 of the greatest people in history have erred. They've made mistakes. They've they've done things. But once you get this information, and that takes a lot. Sometimes sometimes we're so scared to see, to be quote unquote wrong. And I know a couple people like that. I know a couple people where it's like, but you can't see where you made that mistake. And how about I was that way at one point in time? So just the need to be right. Like the
Mm.
need to like I had it. The need
And
to
we
be
need to
right.
talk about that. That's not
This-
always ego. That is
yeah.
not always ego.
Yeah.
Sometimes it could be because a person feels like they need their place in the world.
Mm. Yeah,
God,
I think
man.
I think I think
Mm.
my son does it now, Elijah. Anytime he tells me something, the other day he said, "Well, I don't know." I was like, "What? You don't know?" Like, Lord have mercy. This is the first time that I've seen so that you don't know something. I gotta.
Not
I was
Elijah,
like,
Mike. No, man. No, no.
I said, I gotta stop because something's not going on right. Something's not right in the world. But I told and I joked with him. I said I made that. I had a comment. I told him. I said, listen. Up until I was 18, I knew everything. And then after I turned 18, 19, 12, I'm like, wait a minute. There's a lot to this thing that I don't really know. And then from that point on, and then it's just a thirst for knowledge from that point on. So, guys, it's okay to be as a leader, even in your own house. And sometimes, you just take it. Hey, I was wrong. Don't make a big deal. Maybe somebody else might make a big deal out of it or whatever it is. But after a certain after a certain time, you start to be so. You gotta once again, you gotta be right within yourself. Like it got to be this way within yourself. Once you start to get that within yourself of, hey, sometimes, hey, they're gonna laugh at me. It's not, hey, you start to laugh at yourself because ultimately it is funny, right? And then you go from that point on, brother. Let's have some last words on this topic, since it's and I'm sure this ain't the last time we'll talk about it, but the series is over.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Go ahead and run down your last couple of words or your last statement.
I just like for us to just take something tangible, man. Do your research. Find out that there's certain philosophies that seem great, and from the outside in, there's organizations that seem and people that seem a certain kind of way, and they say things that make sense, and not to say that it doesn't or it does or it doesn't, but do your research on it. Where did they get it from? The brother brought up Martin Luther King, nonviolence. Okay, where did he get that from? Mahatma Gandhi. That was one of the people that he looked to. How do we form this? How do we form these different thoughts and how we get there, and then think about the time period he was in, because nonviolence essentially is a strategy, right? So this is how we're going to do it. This is well thought out. Pay attention to where they got that from. Do your due diligence on the philosophies. There's nothing new under the sun. Like most of the things that your philosophy is based on should just be laws. Ultimately, and I because I'll cut it real short. Lead yourself, man. Like really go out, lead yourself, find some people to go around so that you can actually and that will be truthful to you, and you can have conversations you can be vulnerable with, and they can say, Joel will say, Mike, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, or Joe, but Joe's a lot more compassionate, so Joe's gonna be like, well, brother, I think you should kind of look at this, they'll point me in the right direction for me to actually look at the information that I'm spewing, for me to go back and check it. Be introspective, lead yourself, and then go out into the world and create a community.
I love it. Be honest and verdant, true and filled with integrity. I think that's the first part of leading yourself. That's the first part. I would say don't be so rash. Don't be so in a hurry to lead everybody else. Yeah. Take your
Yeah.
time. Know yourself. Be good with yourself. Be good with following someone else.
Hmm.
My leader once told me right out of the Bible, he said, you reap what you sow. If you find a good person that is leading and you believe in their philosophy, you believe in what they're saying, and you become a good follower, I think that you will pick up a lot of the cues, a lot of the techniques, a lot of the soft skills that you need to be able to lead. And I believe a lot of times leaders emerge.
Mm.
They emerge. There are some people, I suppose, that just go out and they just do the thing. But we're talking about what we believe as good leaders. This is all opinion based, and there's a lot of facts that we have shared with you, but it's our perspective.
Hmm.
It's his perspective, it's my perspective, based off of the information that we have digested. And I think that when you think about it like that, you should go and you should double check everything that we have said.
Yeah.
And then come back with your own conclusion. And if we are in agreement with each other, come on, let's walk together. If we're not, let us know. We'll do another episode on all the things that people said that they think is a better characteristic of a leader. We'll do another episode because as you grow, so do we.
Hmm.
I love it, man.
Yeah.
Great show.
Love you
Great
guys.
spirit.
Community Beacon Leadership Series is finite. We'll catch you next week. Peace.